All right, cool. So there's been a ton of focus on the future and the stuff that's a few years away and the stuff that's, that's coming on the horizon. But Niantic is a success today because of a game called Pokémon GO. You're working on something called a title with Harry Potter in the future. There's probably some AR snobs out in the audience. Like, was Pokemon Go AR? And if not, like, why are you here?
Gee, warm fuzzy feeling gone. No, well, the thing is if you think about augmented reality, like it is a big problem. Like you need to interface with reality. So people say like, oh, Pokemon Go, not AR in a sense. From a technical perspective, like the initial stages of AR, it was a very simplistic version of augmented reality, but it was most people's first impression of AR, and that's technology that came out 2 years ago that is still widely used today. But I think if you get down into the details of what is AR useful for, it is useful for eliciting like a feeling or an experience or providing information to people in the real world. So if you think about it from a technical standpoint, like the initial tech for Pokemon Go that came out is something that's very simple, but what was it supposed to accomplish? If you think about it from that perspective, if you talk to the person who put it in there, he's like, he wanted people to feel that there are Pokemon in the real world to get them excited and outdoors and exploring. So like for the actual purpose of what it's doing, it augmented the reality around them to fulfill the fantasy of everyone to get out there and exploring and socializing, which kind of, if you hear the founders of Niantic, it's like every 30 minutes on the 30 minutes that they're always talking about that. So it is AR. It is not like the full technical, like kind of spending 7 years at MIT in 3D mapping. Like it's like, okay, you write out everything on a board, on a whiteboard and everything else. It's not quite that, okay. But like the actual technology to enhance the experience of everyone, like hundreds of millions of people have played.
Yeah, I mean, is it kind of hard for you to separate out like what awesome IP that you're leveraging with also like, are people coming to it because of the gameplay mechanics? Like, was it kind of hard to separate that out, like in terms of like, was the AR what was special?
I think that the AR, as I said, helped kind of fulfill the fantasy for people that, okay, like everyone's first Pokemon that they catch is in AR and you get to see it there, you get to play with it. But at least in terms of the mechanic that's kind of popular underneath, like there's many different aspects and knobs you need to turn to have a very big success. Mm-hmm. Like the previous game that was out there, Ingress, is like really a cult classic. Like these people like really love the game. Like there's kind of like, to complete it, they'll like fly from Europe to Hawaii to complete a triangle to like complete a mission. Like these people are really dedicated. So like it doesn't quite have the broad reach of something like Pokemon, but like there is definitely a lot of fun in there. And being a kind of Go player myself, like it's not just about the Pokemon.
Mm-hmm. So I know with your background, which is interesting in itself, like Niantic is interested in getting a lot deeper into augmented reality. Like, talk a little bit about how you came to be with Niantic in the first place.
So my company I was the CEO and co-founder of Escher Reality. So we were working on what is now called the AR Cloud, like way before it was cool. Which for the few people in the audience from back then, it was like kind of dark days when it was like, oh, AR, you mean VR? And then Pokemon Go comes out, and then everyone's like, oh, what you're doing is Pokemon Go already did that. And then you're trying to do the kind of AR cloud style technology that's out there. So then we went through Y Combinator in 2017, and like day one of Y Combinator, AR Kit came out, which was like kind of, you're like, all the demos that you made look like similar to what they did, then you realize you're like, oh geez, what, did Tim Cook just step on us? But then turned out like they were doing the tracking system, we were doing the back-end mapping, and then it was kind of a rocket ship from there of like so much stuff happening all the time. And then we joined Niantic at the beginning of this year, and it's kind of the former Google Maps team with like a large percentage of the AR market, and it's been even more of a hell of a ride since we joined.
I mean, drop a little terminology, like when you're talking about AR cloud, like what are the tech problems that you're actually working on that are going to reach maybe an end consumer in some sort of way?
So there's many different aspects. So I think like one way to think about this is like, what do people actually want and what are the applications that they're going after? So for us, like Niantic, we kind of want the Earth as an AR game board for everyone to interface with, and not just for gaming, but also for other applications in the future. Like I'm a roboticist at heart. But we're working on how do you deliver large-scale massive multiplayer scenarios in the real world. So then you can have tens of millions of people all like in a shared interface for people to have experiences. And I like to say, at least in Silicon Valley, we want to make the world a more interesting place.
Okay, all right. I mean, so you're not just a studio making games and making some cool tech that backs them up. Like, you have a platform. Stage is the platform in right now, and why do you want that?
Yeah. Well, Niantic's the former Google Maps team, so they like kind of their first app was Field Trip, where they made kind of experiences to understand the map of the world and kind of Wikipedia for the real world. And then they kind of that wasn't popular, so they went into gaming. So that was kind of a little bit divergent. Now, like kind of gaming is like it's been very, very well, and a lot of Niantic does gaming. Like it's an awesome market to be in. In terms of the platform aspect, as you're building these experiences for the end users, there's a lot of lessons learned that you have. Like it's not actually just about the AR cloud technology, it's about like all the different aspects that you need for a full and complete system for everyone to interface. So then we are essentially spent, like everyone was saying like, oh, the app is crashing at the beginning. Like there was so much freaking traffic on mobile networks that like cell towers were sometimes the bottleneck. It's just like, no, okay, you need a better fiber optic cable coming off the tower for this, or like kind of that level of problems.
Jesus,
so
Pokemon.
Then it's like hundreds of millions of people on the planet have done it. So like just thinking about the problems at that scale. So the analogy I like to think about is moving a 1 megabyte file from like one computer to another computer is one problem. Moving a petabyte from one data center to another data center is a different problem.
Okay.
It's like still moving a file, but when you handle these things at the scale at which Niantic works, it's like you get even beyond like Google level of problems.
Okay. Does Niantic want like a 3D mesh of the world? Is that kind of the goal?
I mean, the founders were the founders of Keyhole, which became Google Earth, so there's always been a strong desire of that. But I would say it's not just about having a 3D mesh, that's a technology. It's about how can you have a platform and kind of a data layer on top of the world that people can have the experiences on. So like connecting it to the experiences, because otherwise you can be building tech that no one cares about other than other tech people.
I mean, they're really interesting privacy questions that come up here. Like, when you think of like all the shit that Facebook has had to deal with this year with like their developer platform, where they're sharing like it's personal info. But when you get into like Niantic's area, like if you have developers on your platform where there's a 3D mesh that might have like the inside of people's houses and stuff like that, like what sort of questions do you have to be asking yourself, and are you like equipped to ask those questions right now, or is it just like this huge tech wave that you're just going to have to like deal with as it comes up?
I mean, for touching on the issues of privacy, like it's a very, very sensitive topic, and it's rightfully so. Like you want to have a lot of trust with end users, and then because otherwise, if you're trying to do bad things, what we're trying to do is provide the technology and then the bare minimum that you need to create the experiences that people want, that they opt in. So that's kind of a difference in between, say, general third-party players that are just like, oh, we want to collect your data in a sense, and like kind of you have like Facebook in there. I mean, I have a lot of really wonderful friends at Facebook, but for us, like every Pokestop is crowdsourced by our users. So they go out and they take a picture, I want to play a game here. And then it's like they choose it, they select it, they send it to us. There's a vetting process that goes through to kind of say, is this a good place to play? Is this like a walled off area? Like you don't want to put it inside military bases, et cetera. But no, for us, like when you're approaching these problems, one, what is the experience that you want, and what is the minimum that you need to do, or the minimum data that you need to accomplish that, but then also enhance the whole
Which is still a lot of data, probably, the minimum amount that you need. I mean, it's a crazy amount, I'm sure.
Yeah, especially when you have like the massive kind of user base that Niantic has.
Yeah.
So it's something that we are very, very conscious of, and like it influences the design decisions at every step of the way.
Is that easier to do when you're like the only one really building on your platform, and does it become harder when you like all of a sudden developers need access to certain like pieces of data to kind of inform like how they're structuring their own games?
Yeah, like that's one of the nice things, and one of the reasons I sold my company to Niantic. it was just because you can have that feedback cycle where you can like stand up and you're like, hey Steve, like do you want this feature? And then Steve's like, okay, yeah, that sounds great in these ways. And you're like, okay, then you can build that feature. So that like iteration cycle of knowing what is the feature to make, what is the feedback loop in there. Now when you start to expand the platform out to work with third parties, then that feedback loop, it becomes a little bit more distant, but then you need to just have strong communication, and that's for any platform that goes out there. There's always going to be that developer relations, working with them, deciding what actually needs to be done, what is the new technology that needs to be built. Because it's like right now we are leading the space in terms of just deciding like, here's what AR is for hundreds of millions of people around the world. As that gets into, there's other people working in that, then working with them to help decide that. And that's just going to be as the whole market develops.
Is it like, it seems strangely like a lot of, like you have to make a lot of decision making on like what like enabling this technology in the first place. They're like very difficult tech problems. But then like the ethical like things you're having to deal with too, like are they like hard to keep in like front of mind during this? Because it's just like it's so much 3D data, and I know it's easy to like sensationalize in some ways, but it's also like, you know, I was chatting about like if you have like a map of the inside of your house, like, you know, maybe someone will like a furniture advertiser will be like, there's a great space there for an like 8x3 couch, like we should serve them an ad for that. Like, is that stuff that you like think about, or that's just not how the platform's really structured right now?
I mean, for us, I view as you get into like any space, like if you think about the early days of Google, like you need to think about, okay, there's a lot of data that you need to use, but then what are the experiences that people want? So like for us, we think about a lot of the different aspects that go into it, and then like the ethical concerns, and like they're like not just the legal lines, but just what we feel comfortable. And like one of the examples that I like to use, because coming from a robotics background, like Google with the self-driving car, Waymo, there's people going out, we're going to be just kind of, the liability is on the end users who are driving the cars. And then Google went out there and just said, no, we'll take all the liability. And that like really changed how the market thought about kind of, there was a gray area in there, and then other people were trying to say, no, like the gray area, like this is black and this is white. And then like Google just went out there and said, no, we'll take on the liability. And then that's like, were they legally required to? Absolutely not. But like, well, it wasn't clear, the laws weren't drawn, but like by leading by example and knowing or keeping these concepts in your mind as you're designing all these things is extremely important. I think like everyone here working on this technology and developing in the AR space, you are dealing with reality. So then being able to like be conscious of that and being aware that, hey, you don't want to have all these kind of bad information out there, and kind of there are dangers, but like if you're conscious of them and you make like the right choices, and then especially at the beginning, what are the experiences that people want, and then like communicating that.
Okay. You know, I'm sure you learned so much in the course of like creating a game that scales that quickly and that fast. Like, I think, you know, it was interesting once ARKit was released, just seeing like the number of developers that built titles that like were kind of AR only, and they like boxed themselves into this corner where like people would be interested to use the app to show it to someone, but then they have to have this like big space in front of them, or they have to have a tabletop. Like, you know, I think there are probably a lot of people who play Pokemon GO who have the AR mode off. And like, how important is it to like have a game where augmented reality really enriches the experience, but it's ultimately like you can still play it like just sitting like without like the camera engaged and like, you know, stuff like that.
You can't quite play Pokemon Go if you're like just sitting.
Sure.
So like
Yeah.
it's a different version of the reality aspect. So if you like, I view forcing augmented reality on the general population is not going to work out well. You need to provide actual value. And then like maybe it's okay, people will take pictures with it. A lot of people take a lot of pictures of Pokemon in the real world in a sense, and that's like a very popular thing that people can do. It's more figuring out what is different about AR? Why do you need an experience in augmented reality? So like when ARKit first came out, there was like tic-tac-toe for AR. And like you don't need AR to play tic-tac-toe. And like it like really like you're like looking at it as an AR person, and you're like, no, like this is really messing up the space. So I've personally found there's like two areas where augmented reality actually changes the type of mechanics that you can do. So the first is the position of the phone actually matters, or the position of the headset or whatever. So like you want to like play ping pong, or like you need to move the phone back and forth, or shoot people, and like we have a demo about that. The second one is what I consider to be like the really interesting one longer term, is thinking of the real world as content. How can you engage in the real world and have experiences change based off the real world? So one of the demos that we did back at Escher was mining color out of the world. So then the gameplay would change based off of the color of the room. So then you could like, if you wanted more gold resources, you could put up more post-it notes. So like people could actually change how the game dynamics and the balancing aspects would work just based off of that. Now that's different for every room. That's a new experience in every location. And like in Pokemon GO and Ingress and everything else, like or for Pokemon, there's different Pokemon in different locations. Like when you go to India, then first thing you want to do is like pull out your phone and what are all the Pokemon you can find here. But again, thinking of like the real world as content is, I find, a really interesting area to explore.
Okay. I've actually chatted with a lot of people who seem pretty interested in the AR cloud space right now. It seems super hot right now. So, but like, you know, they're also, I think it's interesting.
13 months ago.
Yeah, Niantic's like, you know, at the forefront of this, but there's always just this kind of like looming presence of Apple, like, and you know, wondering what all they've been working on for this longest time. Like, do you feel pretty confident that Niantic is ahead of where Apple is right now?
So if you think about like what is different of Niantic versus the giants of like Apple and Google, we have we have a majority of the market by far in terms of it. And then we also have a culture for the last like 6 years of working with our users to collaboratively like map out the different locations that they have. Like people go out and willingly take a picture, upload it to us for party applications. They want to play experiences in there. Like Google could not afford to hire the number of people on a daily basis that we have as our user base. And we are like excited to, or me personally, like I want the AR tide to rise in general. And I view Niantic as in a leadership position to help do that. And we're working in different areas in promoting augmented reality in general to have people experience the world in a different way. As you get into like Apple and Google, like they have different incentives, different cultures aligned. Like Apple will never do like an AR cloud style solution for kind of Android. Google has like their own incentive structures associated with it. For us, we really like, it's not, oh, like we want to own this technology in a sense. We want to create a world that everyone can enjoy and have it like personalized and fun, and like the kind of, what is the world that everyone wants to have?
Okay.
And then thinking about it from that angle, which being one of the first party developers and building the technology for it, we are in a very unique position to do.
Do you always feel like you and the platform as a result are kind of always at a disadvantage just because you don't have hardware level integration, really?
Well, it depends. There are certain things like kind of you still need Google search even though you have an iPhone or a Samsung phone. So in terms of there are different aspects that work well on the hardware. So like for ARKit and ARCore, like I would expect that in a few years to become like chips that go into the individual devices, and like kind of creating different technologies in that space, then that's very much a hardware advantage. If you think about the kind of network effects of connecting everyone together, then that's something that's not necessarily hardware specific. Granted, working with the hardware like can give you a small bump.
What do you think is the most exciting thing that you're working on right now in AR, just in terms of like adding to experience?
Do you mean from a technological or
Yes.
gameplay?
Yeah.
Oh, so I always really liked the concept, and I used to talk about this endlessly at Escher, is just having like a whole arena, like every one of you should be able to like, I don't know, either like shoot lasers at me or have like a whole experience like all together. So I always really like the like just what is a massive like city scale, like planet scale style experience that everyone can go into. Like if you look at the first video for the trailer of Pokemon GO in 2015, so talking about 3 years ago, you had all these people rushing into Times Square playing and like trying to catch a Mewtwo, and everyone battling in a sense. Like that is, and it's not about the technology per se. Granted, I'm like a technologist, near and dear to my heart. It's about having a lot of people experiencing something together, and then the beauty of AR is when it all works perfectly, it should be invisible. And then it all becomes about the people and the experience. So like doing that on a massive scale. Like just watch the original trailer for.
Okay. All right, cool. Hey, well, thanks so much for chatting with us, and thank you all for listening so much. Awesome. All right, cool.